The own company or the CEO?
Is that my face?
You're doing a nice job on it.
Good evening, and welcome to the April 18th, 2018 meeting of the Public Works Advisory Board. All members except Stephen Shively are here, so we have a quorum. There's no announcements or presentations, so we'll open up public comment period for people who would like to speak on items that are not on the agenda, if they would come up to the podium. Seeing no one, we will close public comment period. The first item on the agenda is the consent calendar for the approval of minutes of March 21st, 2018. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I'll second it. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Business item B1, the director's report. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you can see, the director's report keeps improving each week with, I think, more pictures and more description of the activities that we're doing. We have our division managers here to answer any questions you may have. Highlight a couple of things. I don't know if anybody knows, but the Public Services Building, Community Development, and Public Works got run into a few weeks ago, and our consolidated maintenance crews, with the help of a couple of outside contractors, facilitated the repairs to the corner of the building. But even on a bigger scale, we have almost a brand new Delmar bathroom. We're getting really close to finishing that up. It did rain a little bit, and you can see how fast our coastal streams react to that rain. Consolidated maintenance crews helped with, clearing of debris, and fire ended up evacuating the due to concerns about how close the water was getting to Top Bank, the mobile home parks down there near Morrow Creek. I'll let Janine talk a little bit more about the transit, short-range transit plan and bus procurement. And Damaris is going to highlight our One Water planning effort, and Joe will take care of utilities. And Mike, do you want to add anything to consolidated maintenance, since you don't have a mic down there at
I'll just add to what Rob said about the restrooms. We're nearly done. We plan to paint a week from Monday and open on that following Friday. Working on putting FRP, which is fiber reinforced plastic, on the interior right now, and we'll be putting down some epoxy floors shortly thereafter. Paint and hang the fixtures and open it up. It's a Cinco de Cuatro party.
Janine, do you want to talk a little bit about the transit?
Sure. So in late March, we received the final portion of funding that we needed to purchase a new transit vehicle for the year-round Morro Bay Transit's fixed route and caller ride service. And once we receive the check, we can start the process for procurement. We will be piggybacking off of the CalAct and Moronga Basin Transit Authority's cooperative purchasing agreement, so we won't have to do our own bid process for that, as they've already gone through that with the state. So Once we get that vehicle ordered, it'll be about 6 months in production, and then once we take possession of it, then we'll get it ready, putting the radio in it, putting the graphics on it, and then getting it out on the road. So that'll be probably about 7 or 8 months from now. And then the other thing we have going on is our short-range transit plan update. We have had the consultant complete their stakeholder interviews and the community survey, and they have put together a potential list of alternatives for service for consideration. They're going to go and further refine those and do an analysis, so they'll identify what the potential cost for each of those proposed alternatives would be, identifying what impact to ridership that may have, and then therefore an impact to what additional revenue we might generate from that, and then determine whether, looking at the fare box ratio, since that is a component, looking at how that may impact that as well. So we are planning for a community forum in May, towards the middle of May. I'm firming up the date with getting a facility, but tentatively we are looking at May 16th before the Public Works Advisory Board meeting, so that we can have those individuals who are transit dependent be able to use the transit service to get to and from the public forum, as we want to hear from them, as well as other members of the public who may not use the service. And so once that's finalized, we'll be putting information out and advertising when that is, the location and the times and everything. So with that, I will pass it on to Damaris.
Good evening. So the One Water Plan update, we'll actually be bringing you more of a formal One Water update next month. We'll give you a presentation on it and where we're at. But basically with the Water Master Plan, they've updated some of the costs of the current and future improvements that are going to be needed. I've met with staff and we've kind of narrowed those down, finalized some of those capital improvement projects that are going to be needed for the Water Master Plan and the Collection System Master Plan. The water supply evaluation, we took those surveys that we sent out to you guys and the rankings and everything, and they're finalizing that, and kind of we'll show you how we're going to incorporate that into the water supply evaluation. The storm drain master plan is still being updated. Some of the projects are still being developed. We have a meeting coming up next week to go over what those projects may be and kind of finalize those projects. So when we bring it back next month, we'll have some actual draft report for you to review, some of the different chapters in it and stuff, so you can actually start to see what the document's going to look like.
Well, the big news on the wastewater side is we finally got a storm end of last month. So that was our big storm event for the year. We wound up having an average of 3.5 million gallons coming into the plant one day and 2.5 the other, with the hourly peaks over 7 MGD. So right now the plant's averaging under 1 MGD, so that shows the effect of the storm event. Unfortunately, during that storm event, we also had an electrical failure at one of the worst times that affected 2 out of our 3 influent pumps that actually pump the sewage, raise it up to actually push it through the treatment plant. So the staff had to man the plant pretty much all night long and into the next night with temporary pumps and getting it. So everything was contained through the treatment process, but we had to it affected 2 of the influent motors, the drives on those motors, and the heaters. Luckily, one of the motors that it affected was a brand new motor, so that was still covered under warranty, and one of the other ones had just been repaired previously that year that the motor shop also covered under warranty for us. So it really was an electrical drive and heater failure, not a motor failure on that. Collection system, during that same storm, staff was able to get out and investigate some I&I areas, known areas of infiltration, and was able to actually run the camera equipment up those lines and identify some areas for repairs on cracks and separations. This was mainly done in the beach track area, the same area that we had previously done the smoke testing. So definitely getting out and putting a lot of effort into identifying problem areas in the collection system and identifying projects to actually correct those areas. Water staff this past month and current month has been busy with a lot of services with all the new construction that you see around, putting in the service connections and the manifolds for that. We did replace one fire hydrant, as you can see in the report, but mostly just general maintenance and service connections.
I've got a question for you. In my previous life, we had a failure in one of the pumps, and we ended up dumping quite a bit of sewage into the river, which cost us almost $1 million. Are we exposed like that too? If something happens, you can't fix it, and it goes over and goes into the creek and goes into the ocean. Are we?
Well, there's definitely always that potential, and we plan and for corrective action for all that, and we have numerous emergency standby pumps that are completely separate from the facility that can actually be used throughout the town at lift stations and at the treatment plant. So we were able to utilize those existing pumps and equipment that we have just for that purpose and able to contain everything.
Anything else, Rob?
Sure, I'll follow it up with kind of the miscellaneous engineering and capital projects items. Our project at the intersection improvements at Highway 41 in Maine is preliminary design and environmental we're working on right now. I have a FHWA, Federal Highways Administration, and Caltrans acronym ICETAP plan for that project. ICETAP is ICE stands for Intersection Control Evaluation, and TAP is Technical Advisory Panel. This intersection has become a very expensive intersection due to meeting site distance concerns by Caltrans, and required up to 20-foot retaining walls along the ramp area. So a team from Federal Highways, Caltrans headquarters are going to be in Morro Bay next month to review the project, review the ground, kick the dirt out there at the intersection, and have all these PhD traffic engineers come up with innovative cost savings measures for this project. Perhaps we can, traffic ops can live with a less sight distance, or we don't need 2 inbound lanes on the roundabout right now. Maybe we can use one inbound lane. Our pavement management, we're taking that to council to complete the project. We've ended up $62,000 under budget on that project. And we are also taking to council a list of potential streets that needs to be at the California Transportation Commission by May 1st. It doesn't quite align with our budget processing and getting it to the PWAB to review, but we'll work on that for next year. Still not sure why they need this information so far prior to approved budgets, but last year we submitted our budget information to them, and that satisfied that requirement. We plan on bringing the pavement maintenance plan to you for those anticipated streets next month. The sidewalk gap closure project also going to council for completion. We ended up about $14,000 over budget on that project, so we're going to use a little bit of that cost savings from the pavement management plan to pay for the overages. Nothing that the contractor did wrong. It was based on, typically when we've put these contracts out to bid, it's been to fill in sidewalk in between where there's sidewalk on either side of it. We've really not done a good topographic survey on this. We had a large section of sidewalk on Main Street where there was no control on either side, and we put out just with planimetrics, basically with a picture of the ground, and told the contractor to put in the sidewalk. They submitted an RFI, asked for control, vertical control out there. We had no vertical control out there, so it took a little surveying and engineering to get that done. Really no change to the Nutmeg tank replacement project. We're, again, waiting for the CIP to come out of the One Water plan. We're continuing to monitor our temporary gauges at Chorrell Creek for stream flow for our permit requirements. Kudos to Ms. Pam Newman, an assistant engineer in Public Works. She worked with FEMA on the flood insurance rating program, and we ended up with a higher rating this year. So citizens that require flood insurance could receive a 15% discount on their flood insurance for us participating in the program. Few of the major development projects that we're working on is, you've probably seen the Morro Mist subdivision there at Bonita and Maine. They started grading operations there. That's a 23 unit, 23 lot subdivision there. Black Hill Villas is still under construction at Quintana and South Bay. Sonic Restaurant is going through the finals of their building plan check at Main and Highway 41. There's a commercial development that's in its infancy in development review at Sunset and Highway 41, and a hotel development about the same state at Atascadero Road west of Highway 1 on the north side of the street there. The Water Reclamation Facility project, we released our draft EIR. Public comments are due May 18th on that project. We'll be holding a public meeting for the draft EIR, going over the aspects of it and requesting written comments from the community. That will be held on May 1st in conjunction with the Water Reclamation Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. We have engaged a new project program management team for the WRF project, Corollo Engineers. Mr. Eric Saris, you've seen him here before with our One Water plan. He will be the new program manager for the WRF. The first step in his work is to get together with the existing technical team and to make sure there's no duplication in services. So he'll be assessing the capability of the NKN group and making recommendations on what aspects they should provide and what Corollo should provide. Some other key dates on the Water Reclamation Facility project. On next Wednesday, right here at the Vets Hall, we'll have a public forum, starting out with a presentation on the project, where we're at right now, followed by a Q&A session. In that Q&A session, the League of Women Voters has agreed to facilitate that for us to keep everything running smoothly on the Q&A. May 1st, as I said, is the public meeting for the draft EIR. That'll be at a WRF-CAC meeting. May 8th is when the proposals are due on the design build for the main portion of the facility, the water reclamation facility there on South Bay, up off of South Bay Boulevard. And on May 18th, the public comments are due on the draft EIR. That concludes our presentation of the director's report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see. Stu, you already started. Do you have any other questions at this time?
Well, I've had some questions on consolidated maintenance and a few other things.
Okay.
Turn the mic on, right?
Yes, thank you.
Question on the streetlight issue. Are most of the street lights converted over to a low energy lights currently? Do you know, Rob?
Yeah, most of our streetlights in Morro Bay are owned and maintained by PG&E. So the lion's share of those streetlights are, we pay an electric bill. It's what we do for those streetlights. So we don't maintain or operate those streetlights, but they have converted those over to LED. Their government relations person is scheduling a meeting we have a fair number of decorative streetlights down on the Embarcadero that have not been converted to LED, and now PG&E has a fixture that'll work in those streetlights, so they want to talk to us about converting those. And then we have a handful of city-maintained streetlights, and I think those, for the most part, have been converted to LED.
We have 11 coming down the Morro Bay Boulevard, and they've all been converted.
Okay, thank you. We have 29 maintenance requests in this list of consolidated maintenance. Generally, what are those requests for?
They can range from anything in-house, helping somebody move office furniture, to replacing stop signs, potholes, limb down on the sidewalk. Wintertime, we've had a lot of requests for berm repair. So it's a wide variety of requests, and it can come from both internal and external sources.
So there's no commonality to something keeps breaking down and needs maintenance on it and so on. There are different cases every time something pops up, right?
I'd say 99% of them are different, but when something does pop up, it's very visible, and it's a good tool for us to use to evaluate and say, well, maybe we didn't fix it right that time. We need to sit down and find a different way to repair this item.
We still do get quite a few pothole fill requests. In my view, that's the commonality of them, or for the most part, is street repair requests.
That's the driving force then, is street repairs. On the consolidated maintenance project, my compliments on the project in Del Mar Park. You're doing a great job out there. And how soon will that be ready?
Our target date is May 4th for grand opening. We haven't quite planned an event yet, but we'll figure something out. And yeah, the guys have really been putting a lot of effort into it. They're very proud. It's nice to have a project like that with such high visibility, and the community really appreciates every time they walk by it. They compliment the staff on what they're doing. It's not often we get the time to pull away from the core duties to work on something like that, but they've really put in a lot of effort to shift over job responsibilities and get it done.
We've saved quite a bit of money doing that and using in-house labor and so on, so thank you for all that. Appreciate that. Sorry. Are we selling ads on our new bus?
The year-round transit buses do not have advertising on them at this point.
I know
only the trolleys have advertising.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past, and as a way to help defray the cost of having transit and so on. And is there a plan to do that?
It's something that I will be discussing with the consultant for the short-range transit plan. They will be looking at some marketing strategies, as well as the advertising on the vehicles is something that I've wanted to bring up with them.
I hear comments about parking from employees on the Embarcadero and no place to park, and they're using up spaces down there and so on. Are we doing something to address that issue?
I did hear from our transit manager, who had heard from Erica Crawford. I guess there were some economic development surveys that had been going around after they had their stakeholder interview with the consultant. So I contacted our consultant and let her know that particular issue had come up and that she might want to reach back out to the chamber to talk to them about the surveying and the specifics of what they were hearing back from the businesses, and see if that's something that somehow gets addressed or an alternative comes up in the list of potentials.
Yeah, I can understand that restaurant employees don't work 8 hours in a row. They work 4 hours or 3 hours, and they need to go back to their car and so on. But of course, they are using valuable spaces on the Embarcadero, and perhaps that's something we can address. On the water operations, reread meters, there's 37 of them. There's meters failing all the time, isn't there, Rob?
Meters do wear out, and we replace meters, but the rereads aren't really due to failure meters. They're due to errors that our meter reading company has made, and a customer has a request, or it just shows up as a bad read, and we send our crews out to reread it. Or sometimes somebody parks a car on the top of the meter box, and you have to go out and reread it. Joe might have some other examples. Those are the majority of why we go reread meters. Punching in transposing numbers on their handheld unit when they read the meter is a fairly common cause of that. And the other one is the vehicle parked on top of the meter.
On water and water conservation, can we separate residential from commercial? Is that already separated? How do we tell how much the commercial is using and how much the residential is using? And what can we do to, create efficiencies in those departments?
We do have it separated, so I can report it showing you separately what residential uses compared to commercial. The commercial they don't typically save as much. They're a little more constrained in that aspect of it. So most of the savings comes from residential, but that's also most of the water use. But I can show it both ways. Okay.
Good. One water plan, nitrates in Bay. Of course, we do have nitrates here from farming and so on. Are we doing anything about that, or is there a plan to do something with the nitrates that filter down into the bay when we get the rain and so on?
We have nitrates. You mean for the water, like the drinking water, for our wells, or for?
Well, I'm told the eelgrass is dying out there because there's too much nitrate level is too high in the bay. So the question is, are we doing anything about that with farming? Are we trying to divert something? What's happening with the nitrate level?
The farming is regulated by the regional water board for their nitrates there, where that nitrate's coming from. For stormwater, we have a bacteria load, so we regulate that. We monitor for it, but we don't have to monitor for the nitrates as far as stormwater is of it.
Yeah, most of the agriculture is outside of the city limits, and we have almost no control over the agricultural land. Only there's a small portion of ag that is within the city limits. But the Regional Board Ag Order has, I think, drastically reduced the amount of high nitrate fertilizer that is being applied to crops. The other thing that's reduced that is costs. Fertilizer is highly reliant on the petroleum industry, and as oil goes up in costs, fertilizer becomes more expensive. And if you can still produce the amount of crops with less fertilizer, that's just more profit. So I think economics is playing into that also.
I see on the wastewater collections a bunch of points made here. How much leakage do we have in the system in a percentage? Is it 10%, 20%, no percent?
Exfiltration is what you're referring to? And that would be hard to actually quantify, exfiltration. The collection system, the way it's designed, is the lowest pressure point in the system, so water is always going to seek the path of least resistance. So a pipe in the ground with ground around it, basically there's less restriction to actually go through the pipe than it is to exfiltrate out of the pipe into the soil. Not to say that it doesn't occur, but not to a very large extent.
Can we tell how much flow we have at particular joints and particular wise in the system, or do we not have mechanisms to do that?
We don't have any mechanism to actually do that.
What we do have with the One Water Plan is a sewer collection system model that really bases, we did have for a short time monitoring out in the system to calibrate that model. So we know typically how much is flowing in a pipe on a daily basis, but we couldn't pinpoint that to the minute and or anything close to that. We can't regulate when people flush.
Okay, I was, rainwater, of course, does things like that, too.
Yeah, rainwater coming in is easier to quantify. I think we have a pretty good handle on that. As you could see, as Joe reported on our recent storms, the flows went up to 3 to 7 MGD on an instantaneous basis from what we're flowing now is under 1 MGD.
When we have high rainwater flows, do we have a place where we can put the water in the meantime so it soaks down in the ground, or does it just all go out to the ocean?
It goes through the plant. We have to treat that rainwater because once it enters the sewer system, it's sewage. It has to go, it's required to go through the treatment plant once it enters the collection system, and currently it discharged through outfall into the ocean. If it wasn't entering the storm drain system, it would end up in the streets, into the storm drain system, and out to the ocean that way. I think I said storm drain system twice, into the collection system.
That's okay. I know we went through and sealed the tops of some of the storm drains so that the water wouldn't seep down in them.
Yes.
And are they all sealed now, pretty much?
I'm not sure all of them are sealed. Joe can answer, has probably a handle on that.
Well, we actually only seal the ones in the low-lying areas where water would have a tendency to pool on top of that manhole and actually get in, because the manholes still require the access to actually be removed and to clean the sewer. But we definitely seal the ones in the low-lying areas.
Great, thank you. And that's all I have.
Okay, I'm going to have Janice go next. I held her back a little earlier, so go ahead.
Well, some of mine was, you just touched on with Stuart. I just need a clarification as just the storm, not being an engineer or a contractor, just Joe Blow citizen on the street. The storm drains, when people talk about storm drains in the wastewater system, sometimes they're separate and sometimes it sounds like you're talking about the same thing. So I just need a clarification on that. When water goes into the storm drain system, does that eventually end up in the wastewater pipes and goes through the wastewater system?
No, that is a separate, in Morro Bay, there are some communities that would have a combined sewer system. So Chicago, Sacramento have combined systems where there's only one piping system that can phase that water. Here, we have two systems. So it enters a grate in the street into a storm drain system. In some cases, the pipe connects all the way through to the creek, or the ocean outfalls into the ocean, maybe through a sand trap first to catch some of that sediment. Other cases, you'll see a storm drain that looks like water's pouring out of it. Well, it is. It flows back into the street because, as I was told as a young engineer, streets are just storm drains that are convenient to drive in sometimes. That was by a former LA County flood control engineer that became the county engineer for San Luis County. Anyway, George Protopopis, great engineer. So they are separate systems. Where water gets into the sewer system is either it leaks in through the top, through the manhole, through holes that are in there. It gets in through illicit connections, or people might have connected either on purpose or inadvertently, not knowing better, their roof drains into the sewer system. It gets in there when the ground gets saturated with water and it rises above the level of the pipe, and I don't know a sewer system out there that doesn't have one or two cracks in the sewer pipes, so it leaks in through those cracks. We have a system here that, especially on the west side of the freeway at the north end of town, is in very clayey soil without a lot of bedding around it when it was built in the 50s and 60s. And that soil is fairly expansive. That means when it gets wet, it expands, and when it dries out, it shrinks, and it moves that pipe around, and it tends to crack that pipe. So we end up with a lot of leaks in our collection system.
And that collection system you're talking about is this wastewater?
That's the wastewater collection system. Typically, when we refer to the pipes in the ground, is the collection system almost entirely refers to the sanitary sewer, the sewer system. Stormwater pipes, drain pipes, culverts would be the stormwater system, which would be separate from that.
Okay. So when you're talking about during a rainstorm and you have excess water at the wastewater treatment, is that water that has gone in through the manholes or just rained in the...
It's a combination of everything that I just described.
Okay.
So it's leaking in through the pipe, it's coming in through the tops of the manholes, which is typically a rarity. It's only those low-lying manholes. Typically a manhole would be near the crown of the street, so the highest point in the center of the street is where you should put those. I know not all the time are things constructed like we would like them.
So then my other question is, I hear a lot of talk about the sewage pipes not being in good shape, and so, you know, I hear comments about here and there. So you're talking about all these pipes that are just normal wear and tear, but they are going to be in good shape for they don't have to be replaced, is what I'm asking.
A lot of the system will be replaced over time. It's a kind of a constant battle.
Okay.
We always strive to eliminate I&I, that's another term you'll hear, that's inflow into the system through manhole lids, illicit connections, or infiltration. It infiltrates from high groundwater into the pipes. So we're always battling I&I. It's a balance, though. You can spend an awful lot of money chasing broken pipes for perhaps a little bit more money on treatment plant capacity.
So basically that's just the problem of the job.
Yes.
So then, okay, infiltration. What is exfiltration?
Exfiltration would be
the
stuff leaking out of the pipe into which, in my opinion, is, I can't say that it doesn't happen, but because most of our sewer lines are not pressurized, and as Joe said, water is going to flow the path of least resistance, it really needs to be under pressure to be pushed out of the pipe. And most of our pipes, where we have the worst issues with cracked pipes, for example, on Atascadero Road and Main Street, I've heard people talk about those pipes, they're underwater a lot of times. And that pressure of the sewage in the sewer line is not going to overcome that pressure of the water that's outside of the pipe being pushed in. So it's yes, we do have repairs that are needed to be made to our sanitary sewer wastewater collection system or sewer infrastructure. But in my opinion, it's the lion's share of the problem is due to infiltration, not exfiltration.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, we'll jump back over to Chris over on the end.
I think most of my stuff's been addressed already. Thank you.
Okay, how about Chris on the other end?
Yeah, Stuart asked a good bunch of questions, but I did get a flyer in the mail with the update, so thanks for that.
You're welcome.
I know it's getting rather polarizing, so it was nice to have that in the mail with some facts and figures and some explanation, so I think it does go a long way.
John.
Hello. I have a few questions. First one,
I noticed in that my Morro Bay, what do you call it? Let me get it. My Morro Bay issue reporting, or what do you say, using the service request reporting thing. I tried to put in an address where I've noticed a new sewer lateral for a house is sunk about 2 to 3 inches on Las Vegas, 350 Las Vegas. So you might want to have a conversation with somebody to fix that, whether you go back through the contractor or if there's something else you have to do. Or if there's somebody, or however you want to handle it, that was one thing. Another one was I noticed that the manhole I reported last year, which was in the flow line of Las Vegas, it was reported that you looked at it, and the sediment is still about the same thickness, so I don't think anything was done to that lid. Is that going to get changed out to a watertight lid, or are you going to add it to a list for future I&I projects?
That's Main in Las Vegas?
Well, it's an 8-inch main down Las Vegas, but
I mean, Las Vegas at Main Street about?
no, it's in front of, I think it's in front of like 345 or 355, I forget it. Not far from where that lateral is sunk.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm curious. I saw that we're going to have the a rate study coming up, and best any guess about which way how much the rates are going to change? Has some of the savings we've done going to reflect, and the improved funding possibilities shown up in any of the monthly sewer fees?
I'm not going to hazard a guess because the lion's share of that rate reduction should occur from when we get the bids in so we can reduce that contingency on the project. So once we get the bids in, the rate consultant will run the rate model with those new costs in there, and then CIPs from our One Water plan. So we'll have a modern CIP list. That rate study will, one thing I forgot to mention, an upcoming item is we plan to hold a joint WRF-CAC PWAB meeting to go over that rate study. So you'll get a copy of that before it gets finalized, and we'll have a chance to discuss that. Probably in the rate consultant couldn't make the middle of the June meeting, so we're trying for that near the first part of June, probably to coincide when the WRF-CAC meeting is, which would be June 5th, I'm thinking. But I'm going to bring up a calendar to see if I can. June 5th likely would be a joint WRF-CAC PWAB meeting.
Okay. How many changes are coming up with, the One Water feeds into like storm drains and things like that? Do you have are you beginning to develop a list of
CIPs? So many of them are everything doesn't have to be done the first year, and a lot of things are related to build out, so they can be phased in over time. For example, in the water system, maintaining fire flow when we get close to our peak population will be an issue, so we'll need to upgrade some water lines. We also will need to upgrade some water lines right now because we're not meeting, fire flow minimums that need to be met. So
I assume those are first?
Yes.
Okay, well, back to that sewer. So what typically would you do with that sewer in the flow line of Las Vegas? That's manhole lid in the flow line of Las Vegas?
I think really the only thing we can do, because we're not probably moving that sewer line, is to put a lockdown lid on it.
Okay, and you'll have to come up with a project to cover that later. Okay. And then the last thing, I tried to report an issue through that My Morro Bay, where I just entered in the address of where the thing was, and you should have about 5 new things on that Morro Mist subdivision, because for some reason, instead of saying, where that lateral was, it moved it over to Bonita.
Oh, okay.
So you may want to think about trying to allow the app to just enter in the address rather than.
And you were using your mobile phone to do that? Oh, tablet, okay. We are changing vendors on the My Morro.
Actually, no, it was my phone.
Okay, we are changing vendors on the My Morro Bay app. So right now we have a vendor called QSend. Not that anybody will, it'll be invisible to the user who the vendor is, but we're changing to a company called CitySource to provide that. So there should be a better user experience and a lower cost to the city.
And I can say my grandson is looking forward to the new bathroom there at Del Mar.
Oh, good, good.
Okay, I've got a couple questions also. Janine, when we do get the new bus, what will be the disposition of the old one? This is a replacement, not an addition, correct?
Correct. What we do with the vehicle purchases is we do a trade-in with the manufacturer, and we get a much higher return rate than if we go and do it at an auction. So what the trade-in cost will come off the cost for the vehicle, so that helps as well.
Okay. Also on the short-range transit plan, about how many respondents on your various surveys will that be shown as to how many came from online, how many came from on board, things like that?
Yes, there will be a technical memorandum prepared by the consultant, and that information would be included in with that.
Yeah. At this point, do we feel that we had a good response? You've been doing this for a long time, so.
I don't actually know how many online surveys were done, but the consultant and I had talked about if towards the end she felt like there weren't enough surveys generated, that we would extend the time and we would open it back up. And we did not do that. So the consultant is probably feeling that there was a good enough number to move forward with.
All right, thank you. Let's see. On the, Rob, on page 11, you mentioned the storm drain master plan meeting. Who is in that meeting? What is that meeting of whom?
Let me get back to that.
Okay.
Damaris is going to answer that question because I'm not there yet.
It's staff, so it's Joe, Rob, and I. We meet with Corolla, and they go over some of the capital projects they've come up with the stormwater. And same thing we did with the water and sewer collections. They kind of go over the different projects where they see some of the projects need to go, and we kind of hash through them.
Okay, so that's not a public meeting, that's a in-house meeting?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
And then the results of that meeting will be incorporated into the document, and then that'll be presented to this body and posted on the city's website.
Okay. Let's see. Towards the end on page 20, the engineering capital projects. Just a question on the hotel development on the west side of Highway 1. Is that between the school and the highway?
Yeah, there's a vacant piece of property right up next to the freeway, kind of a long rectangular piece with the bike path on one side, and yeah, that's the one.
Okay. And you mentioned the joint PWAB WRFCAC meeting is probably going to be June 5th. That's Tuesday, the election day, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I may not be able to attend that. I'm a poll worker, so.
Oh, okay.
Do you know whether that will be one about daytime, evening?
3 to 5 typically is when the WRFCAC meetings are.
Okay. Is there a meeting after that so that it would be limited to the
Yes,
2 hours?
Planning Commission comes in right after that.
Okay.
We should probably, well, we don't have any, I don't think we have a polling place in Morro Bay for that election.
I know there's one out at Del Mar. That's where I'm
Okay.
assigned.
I just wanted to make sure that we should check to make sure that this room is not a polling place.
I know it has been in the
yeah.
past,
Yeah.
but I think there's a couple in Morro Bay. Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? John?
I do poll working too, so it may be a conflict for me too.
Okay, we will look at that schedule and make sure that we're not conflicting because there may be other people that are busy that day too with the election.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board? If there are none, then thank you, staff, for all of your input tonight, and we will, any future potential agenda items that you would like to mention at this time, or just what you've already stated?
I think
earlier?
the ones that we've stated will get us through
Okay.
for the next couple months.
Okay. Then we will adjourn to May 16th, 2018 at 5:30 PM. Thank you, everyone.